Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Malaiko K. Fowler of Malaiko's International, seeking to make all lives actualize and inspire through kind actions. I am passionate about inspiring change through interconnectedness and taking compassionate actions towards our fellow human beings. Today, I love to talk to you about the topic of I refer to as interconnectedness. Interconnectedness, the misguided nature of assumption. Assumption is so huge. It's not a topic that we pay enough attention to for many factors because it doesn't seem like it's major, but I'm going to tell you tonight why it is extremely major or a necessity, and why with assumption our lives, our minds, and everything else we are shaped by that in this world. Assumption, interconnectedness, the misguided nature of assumption. Ladies and gentlemen, the misguided nature of assumption is dangerous. It is a dangerous human currency in our society, I believe. The misguided nature of assumption is a dangerous human currency in our society because it creates insecurities due to misrepresentations, which decrease our hopes and beliefs when we think that fear is another form. Just if we can just cross over and just think that fear instead of being assuming, and because once you have an assumption, you're in the face of fear, then you go on to being angry. If you can just come to that point, because the misguided nature of assumption is a dangerous currency. It is a dangerous currency to humanity and that of society because it creates a sense of insecurity. Why? Because it's due to a misrepresentation, lack of information, lack of what the facts are. What that does, it decreases the hopes. It decreases our hopes and belief. And where are we put? We're put into a place of being fearful. When you become fearful, there's no denier. You become a little bit angry. That starts with being upset and angry. Because at that point, instead of finding a form of freedom, knowing that fear is a beautiful thing. Fear can be in both negative and positive way. But you find yourself in a place, in a form of denying of freedom. That freedom, when we think that being fearful is in the place that we need to be, what happens? Your misrepresentations, which decrease your hopes and beliefs. When we think that fear is another form of freedom, it is a beautiful place to always look at fear as another form of freedom, because in that space which allows us to enter and live together in an interconnected world. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say to you today, I started my video with assumptions, the misguided nation of assumption, which is a dangerous currency to which is a dangerous human currencies in our society. People always think that a currency is a currency. There are lots of exchanges of currencies through the nature. For example, assumptions becomes a currency. The reason why assumption becomes a currency, it is at the core of every human existence, because assumption and fear coexist with each other. And assumption and fear that coexist with each other, there is something that derives in that space, is that judgment that you make against your fellow human being. So assumptions and fear coexist to a certain extent in accordance. That becomes that in accordance with that internal constitutions. That internal constitution is what is inside. What are you thinking? What are you assuming? What haven't you given yourself the chance to learn that will allow you to see your fellow human beings as you want to see yourself? What's your misconception? What are you misconstruing at that point? That internal constitution is sometimes is leading and sometimes become misleading. Assumption enables us to attempt to produce outcomes which is on the other side of the equation, however, cause us to generate fears. And what do? We create a division. What division do we create to our fellow human beings? We create divisions. That division we create is an assumption and fear. You know what? You have assumption. When you make an assumption about something, it's because there's an underlying, underpinning reasons of fear. And that underpinning reason of fear will make you angry eventually if you cannot solve the problem. So you have with you here, assumption and fear can have both positive. These two things are possible to have both positive and negative connotation. Why? Because that it is healthy. It can be healthy or not. For the most part, it's healthy in a way. Honestly. So for example, let's think about this. For example, we can be fearful of here I am. I'm fearful of failing my comprehensive exam as I went through the process. I assume here that it's going to be exceedingly difficult. But what I did not do, I did not include what I required that I needed to include was a healthy emotional disposition, believing the process, and also believing I, as a human being, will go into this process Okay? I'm gonna go into this process believing as a human being that other people have been in this place, that have existed. No matter how fearful it may appears, no matter how fearful it may appears, I'm placed into a human position that I have to come out with an outcome regardless of what. So do I go into a place of wanting to make an assumption based on other human beings, or based on the assumption where I seek to know? There is a difference between knowing and understanding. Do I seek to know how and understand at what place in my life I'm gonna go forward? So when I spoke about assumption having that positive, assumption and fear live together. It is a correlated space, because assumption and fear is absolutely a correlated space. They are a place where both positive and negative connotation can be healthy or not. So for example, like I said, I was fearful of an exam because I assumed it would be exceedingly difficult for me. In that space, I thought that might be a healthy emotional disposition, because obviously nothing comes easy in this world to process, and one which may cause one to be better. So we think about that. But look at this on the other spectrum here. So on the other end of the spectrum, I may be very fearful of what others would think, that if I took this exam, boy, I'll be a failure. This is gonna happen. Everybody's gonna laugh at me. But ladies and gentlemen, that depicts a negative outcome of assumptions. Because what? It feels in the direction of fear. You know, something might be assumed based on predictions in order to function in our daily lives, as there is not much certainty in our world. I'm going to stop in this phase of assumption and fear. Assumptions sometimes lead us to a place where we are judging others. Assumption sometimes, not always, it becomes the misguided nature of assumption that is a dangerous currency in society. Assumption is necessary, but assumption needs a balance in this world. How are you going to be useful and necessary for our human needs? It all depends on the phase of where you are in terms of assumption. Never to make assumption of anything that you do not really know the true story about. We live in a world today that we are interconnected by the very natures of eco's habitat. We serve our fellow human beings and we should expect nothing but simple kindness. If you are going to receive and accept living in a world that is internet connected, your place in this world is not to pass any judgment, because here was happening to assumption takes you to a phase of being truly fearful, and then assumption takes you to a place where you are doubtful. Being fearful, you begin to be doubtful of a situation. You quite don't understand what's happening. And when that happens to you, when you make that doubtful assumption with an inclination, when you come into a place and you just don't believe, you shut down your entire human aspect. And when you shut down your entire human aspect, what happens? You are at a place where nothing matters. And if nothing matters at the psyche of our human beings and our human belongings, there is something that happens. And at that place and state, I want you to think about something. I want you to deeply think about something. How is it in your life? How is it in your life that you get rid of that this proposed notion of assumption? How is it that you can begin to find a route into an answer where you can distill something that isn't necessary to be? Because you have assumption. Assumption takes you to a phase of being fearful. Assumption takes you to a phase of being judgmental. And assumption takes you to a phase of being an angry person. And what that entails, it entails a place where you refuse to see your human purpose as a place of where your fear exceeds your human spirit. Your desirable approach to where your existence should actually mimic an inflection of how you truly should feel about yourself becomes tarnished. And within that space, you create a sense of fearfulness. You create a sense of divisiveness. You create a sense of where you could build a wall and stop your fellow human beings. Ladies and gentlemen, as I end my video, I intended to just talk about assumption that leads us to the face of fear, assumptions that leads us to the face of judging others, assumption that leads to a face of we becoming very angry. I want you at this present state to take into consideration and think about your state of what you are assuming from whatever lens you're looking through. Think about not the lens you look through or recommended for you, but your own human beings. And as your own human beings, what is the state of your being? Your state of being is that I'm going to assume that every human being is good, no matter where they come from. I'm going to give them a chance in this world. And that chance that you gave that human being for where they come from, that assumption of a human being stands up to be, I have no fear. I trust nature. I do not believe that I have to have a preconceived notion of anyone. I do not believe that I have to start with an inclination of having from an assumption to fear. And that fear is a judgment. That judgment then makes you an angry person, where you begin to take actions that are unnecessary to your fellow human beings. As I end my video, it's not a very long video. I want to thank you for listening, and I wish to continue the conversation about assumption. I want to wish you a beautiful day, and I will say goodbye.